welcome back to my channel, and welcome if this is the first time that you've tuned in. Today I'm here with a tutorial for how to make a teeny tiny little hexagon pincushion. Last week I showed you how to make this tiny hexagon flower. If you missed that video, I'll leave a link to it above. But today I'm going to show you how to turn it into this really cute pincushion. Well, actually it's more of a needle stop, that's how I use it anyway. I just pop my needle in here when I need to put it down for a minute whilst I'm working on something. Just a place to park the needle basically, and it's so super cute and I find it really useful. I use it all the time. I have a few in different colours and they're really fun to make as well. So let's get started. This was originally a tutorial on my blog and you can still find the tutorial there. I will link to it below, so then you will get some written instructions and step-by-step photographs which go nicely with this video. First of all, you're going to need your backing fabric. So today I've chosen this lovely teal aqua colour cotton, just quilting cotton. This is a 2.5 inch square. You also need 2 rectangles as well, which are 2.5 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. In addition to those, you will also need 4 squares of a fancy fabric. I've chosen this really pretty Liberty, and these squares measure 1.25 inches. You can use scraps for this. It's the perfect project just to use scraps for everything really, and that's another reason why I really love it. Now, as I showed you in my last video, I made my hexagon flower from scraps of fabric, and I used hexiform templates inside, as you can see here. These templates are designed to be left in because they are made from a fabric and they give it a really nice structure. But you might use paper templates, which is what you would typically use for English paper piecing. And if you did use paper templates, you'll need to use an iron to press your hexagon flower, then you need to turn it over and remove the paper templates, and then give your hexagon flower another press with the iron, making sure all of these seam allowances stay pressed under. When you've done that, you are ready to then applique your hexagon flower onto your backing fabric here like this. The little tool that I really love to use for this is this really cute cuts ruler. You can see it here. It's brilliant because I actually needed a 2.5 inch square for this project, and I can really make sure that I've got my hexagon flower exactly in the middle because of the way the lines are on the ruler. So I line it up with the edges, I can see, yep, that's pretty much in the centre, so I'm happy with that. And now I'm going to use some fabric glue. I'm going to use the Sewn glue pen to just stick it in place. Because the hexagon flower is so tiny, I don't use pins for this. I just put quite a lot of glue on to the flower just to make sure it's in place and it's not going to move whilst I sew it. So there we go. Great, I'm happy with that. I'm ready to sew. I've been using this wonderful Invisifil thread for my tiny EPP and applique. I really like it. It is a polyester thread, but that means it is really strong, but it's really fine. It's 100 weight, and I just think you get really good results with it. Of course, I'm not saying you need to have this thread. You can use any thread that you've got, and you should definitely use what you've got. You don't need to buy things particularly for this, but if you did want to give it a try, I really recommend it. Again, I'm not sponsored by any companies for that sort of thing, but I just thought I would share what I really like to use. So just give it a little snip with my snips, and then thread my needle, and then we're ready to sew. I'm using a, oh, it's not the right one, this one. I'm using a clover, black gold Applique Sharps needle, size 9. That is my favourite. So once I put a knot in the back of the, in the end of the thread, I then start at the back, bring my needle up right in the corner here, and I'll just start my applique stitch all the way around the edge. Of course, it's a little bit tricky with it being so tiny, but once you get into the rhythm of it, it's absolutely fine. I have a whole video about how to applique a hexagon flower onto a backing fabric, and so I'll link to that above as well, up here, so you can watch that if you'd like to. Just teeny tiny stitches all the way around. I'm going down into the backing fabric and then up into the hexagon. Just doing the last bit as I've been all the way around. And I'm back to the beginning again. Yep. So just put the needle down, head to the back, and just, loop it through to make a knot. Okay, so that bit is done. So I've just been adding some tiny running stitches all the way around the edge of the hexagon flower, like you can see. And I do have a video all about this technique, and I'll link it above if you'd like to check that out. But I really like it. I think it adds some nice definition and a nice hand-stitched look. I used 2 strands of embroidery thread for that. And it's just a simple running stitch. And now I just need to tie it off at the back with a knot. And now we're ready to make the corners. So now it's time to make the corners. So what I like to do, use a water erasable pen, and I like to mark where my corners are going to be positioned. So I measure 1 inch in from the corner to the centre, just mark it with a little dot, and then I also measure 1 inch down from the corner to the centre along this side, and do the same over here. 1 inch in and 1 inch down, and then just repeat this on the other side. So you want to measure down 1 inch in, and again 1 inch in, 1 inch down, and there you can see your markings. And if they did show at the end, because it is an erasable pen, you can just wash it away. So now what I do is I just join those lines together, so it just gives me something accurate to work from. And again, if this was to show at the end, it will just wash away. So I just like to have the guide there, just to make sure everything is lined up nicely. Okay. There we go. So the next step is to take your fabric square, fold it in half so you get a nice line right across the middle. Just finger press that so you get a visible crease. And then you want to position that with the right side down onto your backing fabric, and just make sure you line those creases up. And I just use a dab of sew line glue pen to hold that in place on that side. That is going to be trimmed away later on anyway, but it's just to hold it in place. Don't put it on this side, just put it on that side. I just find that works better than pins. So the next step is to sew right on that crease line there, which lines up with the line that you drew underneath. You can do it by hand or you can do it by machine. It's certainly quicker by machine. Personally, I like sewing by hand because I feel like I'm more accurate when I sew by hand, but that's just a reflection on my lack of machine sewing skills, so it doesn't matter at all. Just use a short stitch like if you're using a sewing machine. So I'll meet you back here when I've done that. So I've just sewn across this line here, and when I fold it back it gives me a lovely nice crisp seam, and it's right on that line, so it's nice and accurate. So now all I need to do is repeat that step for the other 3 corners. So I'll meet you back here when I've done that. Just a little tip, if you struggle to see your creased line on your square of fabric, as I am doing right here, it's difficult to see it because it's such a pale colour, then another good thing to do is to just sort of roll it back and crease it again, lining it up with that line that you drew there, and you can see it much better. You could even draw on top of that line again with a water erasable marker if you need to, just to help you see exactly where that line is. Okay, don't worry if your squares end up sticking out a little bit off the edge, because we're going to trim them back. Okay, so I've just got this one left to do. It just needs a dab of glue, hold it in place because it's worn off. So I'll line it up, and then, as I was saying, fold it back so I get a nice line there to stitch on, and I'm ready to stitch across there. Another tip for sewing these seam lines accurately is that you might like to draw the lines on the back, and then you can see them a bit more clearly. It's up to you. You could draw them on your corners, or you could draw them on the back, or both, whatever helps you. Right, so I've done my 4 corners now, and I'm ready to trim them back. So making sure all of your squares are still folded in to the centre, you need to just trim back your seam allowances. So I'm just lining up my ruler with the stitching line, and I'm just cutting a 1/4 inch off each corner. Oops. Like so. Not cutting a 1/4 inch off, just cutting it off so that the seam is just a 1/4 inch left. Just cutting the corners off, basically. There we go. So what I like to do now is press open my seams here. You can finger press them open, or you can use your iron, but I like to use this little seam roller. It's made by Clover. They sent it to me to try out, and I really like it. It isn't something I ever would have bought or something I ever thought I really needed, but actually after using it, I really do recommend it because it's so handy when you don't want to go back and forth to your iron. And as you can see, it just presses the seams open brilliantly, and it's great if you're doing foundation paper piecing or anything that involves lots of patchwork pieces and you don't want to go back and forth to your iron. So I do really like that, and there we go. So now I like to just square everything up. So I have this handy little ruler, but if you don't have a 2.5 inch ruler, then you just need to trim everything down to make sure it is 2.5 inches. So I'm lining it up with my Hexagon Flower, and then I'm just going to trim and trim. Okay, my rotary cutter is a little bit blunt, as you can see. I'll try again. Definitely need a new blade in there. So I'll just line up again and trim that edge. Okay. Top. Making sure it's exactly where I want it to be. Bring it down. There we go. So now it's time to add the backing. So you need to take your 2 rectangles that you cut earlier on, and you need to line them up like here, and just fold one of the edges, one of the long edges in. And again, the seam roller is brilliant for that. Folding it in like that, about 1/4 inch, and then place it on like that. Might be a good idea to use pins for this one, just because you don't want to use glue now. It would ruin the front of your piece, front of your pincushion. There's the other piece, like that. Okay. And now what you want to do, again by hand or with your sewing machine, it is to sew all the way around the edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So sew all the way around by machine or by hand. I'm going to do it by machine for speed this time, and I'll meet you back here when I'm done. So I sewed around the whole edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving this opening open, and now it's time to turn it right the way through. So the right side is showing. I went round twice just to give it a bit of extra supports, just to make it extra strong, a bit of extra strength. Sometimes I like to use a little crochet hook, but it's upstairs, just to poke out the corners. And there we have it. Not too bad. So time to stuff it. I just use ordinary polyester toy stuffing. That's what I've got. But it's really nice when you pick up those paperweight. It's really nice when you pick up these pincushions that have walnuts in them. They have such a lovely feel, so I hope one day I'm able to buy something like that. But at the moment I'm just using what I've got to hand, and it works just as well. And you want to stuff it so it gives you a really nice shape, so just trying to find that balance between making sure it's full but not over full, making sure you get everything pushed into the corners. And yeah, that looks really nice. Like that, gives it a good shape. That's actually the top. I decided that was the top one. So now it's time to ladder stitch the back shut. So now it's time to ladder stitch the back together, and this is probably the trickiest part because you really need to just make sure that raw edge is turned under by about 1/4 inch on both of the sides, and then pinch it together like so. And then what you need to do is just take a small stitch on one side and then another small stitch on the other side directly opposite, and work your way along the seam like so, keeping your stitches directly opposite one another and making sure they're quite small. So it's hard to hold it up and show, but hopefully you can see that I just like that. And then another one on the other side. And it's called a ladder stitch because the stitches look like rungs of a ladder. Just move the fluff out of the way. And then when you've done this all the way along, you just pull tight. That's why you really need to use polyester thread for this. Pull tight and then your stitches will disappear. So that's the ladder stitch seam done. So you just pull the thread nice and tight, and then you can't see the stitches, and that's it. So all I do now, just to finish it off, is just make a knot here, and then I'll just bury my thread inside and pull it up there so it's, can't see my thread there, and pull it tight, snip, and then it's buried inside, and that's it. That is the little hexagon pincushion. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that it was easy to follow and that you would like to give it a go and make one too. I've put a link below to the written instructions. There's written instructions and photographs that show how to do it step by step, so hopefully that will help as well. And if you do make one and you share it on social media like Instagram, then do tag me. I'm Vintage Sewing Box on there, and I really love seeing what people make. It's so much fun, and it really gives me a lift when I see it. So please, if you like to share, please do tag me. So thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe. There'll be more videos next week, and do give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Thank you. Goodbye.